Hello everybody, Jason here. So, I have been insanely busy as of late. I have been attending the American Evaluation Association's 2014 conference in Denver. Yay! Lucky me, it's in my city. Rather fortuitous that it happened to be in my city when I'm in the first year of my job, so awesome. Anyways, that's part of the reason that I've been that I haven't put up any of these stream of consciousness videos. The other reason was I was just kind of waiting for something to hit me, and something did hit me. Um, so when I got back from the conference today, one of the channels on YouTube that I've really liked, I've enjoyed a lot, is the game show channel, the PBS game show channel. And I've enjoyed a lot of the dialogue and discourse that Jamin provides on that channel, and it's always been really good. And I like how often he'll pose questions without necessarily getting at any sort of easy answer or anything like that. I mean, and yeah, he does tend to take a more liberal perspective on things, which is apparently more liberal than I am these days, which is another thing I'm going to get into. That'll be my point two on the video. But the big issue that I've got is that the most recent video that he put up on his thoughts on Gamergate, there was a point in the video, and I've got to say that I didn't watch it through its entirety. I watched about half of it. And I just got so frustrated by what he was saying. It was just like, I can't watch any more of this. This is so poorly thought out. And the reason I say that is mostly because of one statement he makes and a lot of generalizations. The statement that he makes is basically that, and he doesn't directly say it in this fashion, but he definitely very strongly implies it, and I will put the link to the video in the description so that you guys can watch it for yourself and make your own judgment on this. But my assessment is that he's saying that it doesn't matter if people represent the group or not. If they're vocal about something and they connect themselves to your group, then that is automatically, by default, the position of your group. More specifically, what he's saying is that in Gamergate's case, because there are some instances of people using the Gamergate hashtag in a very violent and hostile way towards women, that Gamergate is inherently about, to some extent, violence against women. I cannot agree with this logic. I truly cannot agree with this logic for two reasons. First off is that a lot of the situations where Gamergate is being attributed to violence against women stuff, a good example of this is the recent Anita Sarkeesian appearance cancellation, where the person who actually made the threat did not attribute themselves to Gamergate at all. But the people who oppose Gamergate did attribute it to Gamergate. To me, there's a certain conflict of interest in doing that, because if you don't like something and something bad happens to you, it seems to be in your best interest to blame what you don't like for what bad happened instead of actually trying to find out if it did. Now, that's the first issue I have. The second issue is with the broad generalizations. Especially given that, by and large, when these things happen, the tweets on the Gamergate hashtag are, very, very anti-abuse, anti-assault, all harassment. Very anti-harassment. There was plenty of hashtags on Gamergate that were decrying the threats directed at Anita Sarkeesian. And yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some people who take a different perspective on it and are less decrying of those kinds of behaviors. But look at what the majority of the activity on the hashtag is. Look at what some of the more pronounced voices are saying about it. Mundane Matt, for example, he will unilaterally, in every case that I have seen regarding Gamergate, decry anyone who does anything that's harassment or abusive or whatnot directed at really anybody. I mean, specifically against women, because that's what keeps popping up in the sort of Gamergate light, since it keeps getting thrown in our face. I say "are" because I do consider myself a part of Gamergate. So there's a lot more to say that Gamergate isn't about violence against women, isn't about harassing women, than there is to say that it is. And a lot of where the evidence, I'm not even sure if that's the right word, where the opinion that it is Gamergate is coming from are from those who are specifically against it. Those who have taken a stance previously as saying, I am against this. So it was very frustrating for me to see Jamin take a position that was basically saying that okay, yeah. Now, I got to admit, he did acknowledge that there is this corruption in journalism part about Gamergate. That's half of it, actually. The censorship bit is the other half, too. But that he basically said that it does not matter that that's your stance, because there are elements that are doing these harassing behaviors towards women that in some cases are connected to Gamergate, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's like saying that we should condemn all Christians ever and all time because a select few of them try to murder abortion doctors. Now, I'm not terribly fond of Christianity. I'm even less fond of the religious institution of Christianity. I will not condemn all Christians for the actions of a few. But Jamin's statement implies that that's exactly what should be done in regards to Gamergate, and I cannot agree. So I'm really disappointed in the quality of his assessment and opinion in regards to Gamergate. So much so that I'm morally inclined to stop watching his channel, and I have unsubscribed from it. I will stop watching it. I'm really disappointed in this because I've really enjoyed his videos up to this point. He even had a video just preceding this one that was talking about a lot of the ethics in game journalism media, and I really liked it. It was a very well thought out, well analyzed opinion. But this was not. And I'm really disappointed about it, and it makes me lose a lot of integrity in his other work. So I'm morally inclined to boycott PBS Game Show. And I'm really sad about that because I like it. There's one other thing that Jamin says as well that I also disagree with, and he makes a statement that basically says that if you are objecting to the bias and corruption in gaming journalism, then in order for that to be a sincere objection, you have to expand it to journalism in general. I can't agree with that either. Now, this argument is a little bit more subjective than the other ones, but my argument here is that people basically don't function that way. I got passionate about Gamergate because it was an intersection of issues that I care about. It was an intersection of gaming. It was an intersection of what I believe are American liberties that I support and agree with. And it was an intersection of my experiences of identifying as a gamer. I would not have that in any other journalistic venue. Now, yes, there are issues with journalism outside of gaming. I totally agree with that. And I do feel that those need to be addressed in as vigorous a fashion as Gamergate is trying to address the the game journalism ethics issues. But but I'm not passionate about those areas of journalism in the same way, because it's not an intersection for me of multiple things that I care about. And for a lot of people, it's the same thing. It does not intersect with as many things as they care about. So it's not fair to say that it's not authentic or sincere or real or valid for a person to decry the issues in games journalism, because they don't also equally loudly, equally vocally decry the issues of journalism in general. I cannot agree with that assessment. That seems very short-sighted to me. So like I said, I have unsubscribed from PBS Game Show. I will not be watching it anymore. There is one other PBS channel that I do watch. Idea something. I'm blanking at the moment. I apologize. I will say that my confidence in PBS is hit a little bit here. I understand that the show is ultimately more reflective of the people who are directly responsible for its production, than it is about the studio in general. So I will be keeping an eye out to see if PBS tries to take any sort of stance in regards to Gamergate. I know they've hosted some discussion about it in other venues that has been less than positive. So let's just say that the thought had crossed my mind of a general PBS boycott, but I think there's still enough high quality material on PBS for me to say that that's not a legitimate course of action. I'm not going to condemn the entirety of PBS for what a few of their for what's on a few of their programs. If it starts becoming more widespread, though, yeah, I'll need to think about that a little bit harder. So that's the kind of, adjust the camera here. That's the kind of the big picture thing, the sort of the high-minded philosophical bit that I wanted to talk about, or well, I guess that's kind of a high-minded philosophical bit. The next one is probably even more high-minded philosophical, but the political bit. That was the political segment I wanted to talk about. No, I guess this next one's I'll just be quiet and talk about my next bit here. So this fits more into the realm of personal philosophy, kind of like the little conversation I had with myself regarding feminism in one of the earlier videos. This is in regards to my political ideology, or what party I guess I identify as. I have identified myself as a liberal for a very long time. A lot of my views are very liberally minded. And align very well with a liberal attitude. There are definitely exceptions. I support capital punishment. I think that a free market economy is a very efficient way of distributing resources, though keep in mind I'm talking about the academic definition of a free market, not the vernacular definition of a free market. And yeah, I'm not inherently anti-censorship. And this is, from what I can tell, contrary to a lot of liberal philosophy. I've been realizing that there's other areas that I have issue with liberal philosophy on as well, but those are just some of the big ones. So I've been revising my assessment of my political views, and I'm finding that I'm definitely not a conservative, not by a long shot. But I think the word progressive describes me a little bit better, because I believe that the direction that we as a society should take should always be a forward-pointing direction, should be for the advancement and the betterment of the species, of everything as a whole, actually, not just the species, but, you know, we're kind of part of the whole, so hey, we advance too, awesome. But that the idea is to move forward with things, and that we should not get bogged down with ideas like tradition or it's historically what we've done. We should always try to be making things better. We should try to be making things more useful, more effective, more efficient, helpful to more people in a more significant way. I would not be an evaluator if I didn't believe in this, because for me, that is one of the core ideas of evaluation. Evaluation assumes that you can not only identify. Hello, camera. You're being really weird right now. Evaluation assumes not only that you can identify measures and metrics that reflect how a program is performing or how anything is performing, but that you can use that information to help make it better, to improve it. Now, it's an imperfect process. It's as much art as science, and pretty much any evaluator would agree with that, except for maybe some of the federal government, but that's federal government. Anyways, that's a whole nother tangent. So, for me, it's very important that progress happens. So I identify as progressive. Now, I don't identify as a Democrat. I have actually disagreed with a lot of what the Democratic policies and ideals are as of late, especially a lot of what the Obama administration has been doing with executive orders. I do feel like the Obama administration is trying to overstep its bounds, and more than it should. Now, and a lot of the more liberal rulings in the Supreme Court lately. Actually, let me give you an explicit example of this, a very explicit example. And this has to do with the Supreme Court rulings last year in regards to Proposition 8 from California and the Defense of Marriage Act. So let me start with Proposition 8, because this is an area that I think that the Supreme Court actually made a good ruling on. So a little bit of background. Proposition 8 was basically a case where the state was basically said to have discriminated against gay marriage, and the lower federal court, the trial court, basically at the federal level, agreed that the policy was discriminatory and needed to be overturned. And so keep in mind that what we had here was basically the plaintiffs in this case were a same-sex couple, and the defendant was the state. Now, this is California. They were not happy with Proposition 8. It was a ballot measure that passed with a actually a lot closer than it should have, but it shouldn't have passed at all. At least personal opinion. Also, having been a California resident at the time, and that being my birth state. Anyways, so the state government did not want to enforce that law, and when the federal trial court ruling came down saying, "Hey, this should not be done. You guys need to tear down this law," the state was thrilled. They didn't have to uphold a law anymore that they felt was bullshit. So they were not going to appeal it. And, obviously the plaintiffs in the situation were like, "Hey, this is awesome. We got exactly what we wanted." They're not going to appeal that decision. It was what they wanted. So everybody was happy, except for the supporters of Prop 8. And what they tried to do was to basically say, well, no one's going to bring this to appeal. So we are, basically on behalf of the state, going to try to bring this to appeal. And they brought it to the first level appellate court for that region that California was in. And the appellate court basically said, "No way, you guys cannot act on behalf of the state. The state has to be the one to appeal." So then the group that said that, then the group that was trying to support Prop 8 and trying to, do it on behalf of the state, appealed to the Supreme Court. And that's how it got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court also said, "You guys cannot do this. You are not the state. You cannot appeal this." Which is correct, because you have by the procedures set down in our system of jurisprudence, you cannot, unless you're like a legally appointed representative of someone else, you cannot on their behalf, you know, execute legal action or start legal proceedings. You can't do it. Because one of the core ideas of what makes a valid case is that there has to be something in dispute. Go camera. There has to be something in dispute between the parties involved. So, hey, they did it right. Now, this doesn't have as wide-reaching implications as the more liberal perspective would have. Because what liberals would want would be, yes, we're accepting this as a legitimate case, and no, you cannot have Prop 8 because it's wrong. The legal repercussions of that nationwide would have been significant, would have been phenomenally significant. Much more so than basically just bumping it back to saying, yeah, the trial court's decision was totally right, which was much more narrowly geographically focused. And this has to do with what's considered to be valid law. It's because you have to always abide by the precedent set for those circumstances within your jurisdiction. If it's outside of your jurisdiction, the court is not obliged to follow it. It can be used as a persuasive point, but not as a you have to follow this kind of law. So the more proactive liberal position would have been to have that case accepted as a legitimate case, but to have the Supreme Court say, yeah, this is still discrimination. So, and that's not what happened. But I agree with the process. I think it's a fair and a valid way of looking at and working with the law. And I don't think that I do not think that we should be building a society that's based on finding ways around that law in order to make rulings and whatnot. And this is where DOMA comes in, because DOMA was basically it was almost the exact same situation. It was a New York couple, and what had happened was, same-sex couple, what had happened was one member of the couple had died. And, New York recognizes same-sex marriage, but one member of the couple had died. And the other member of the couple did not get any of the, I believe it was tax benefits or something like that. Basically, there was money involved from the federal government's taxation policies around having a partner die, and because DOMA does not allow the federal government to recognize same-sex marriage, so the surviving widow took the federal government to court, and same basic thing. The trial court ruled that the federal government, the federal trial court ruled that basically the IRS couldn't had to recognize this person's marriage. And same basic process, and it got up to the Supreme Court, and this is the Obama administration at the time. They were thrilled with this. They were like, we're not gonna try to appeal this. This is an awesome ruling for us. We don't have to deal with this DOMA bullshit anymore. And it went through the exact same process up to the top, up to the Supreme Court, just exactly the same way that Prop 8 did. But at the Supreme Court level, what the ruling was is that they allowed it as a legitimate case because there was a financial interest involved. Which to me makes no sense. That goes against the idea that you have to have an issue in dispute between the parties involved. And there was, again, no party involved here. This was just people who were trying to support DOMA on behalf of the federal government without the federal government's approval to do so. This made no sense to me. So, and, of course, they ruled that DOMA was discriminatory and needed to be, at least the section of it that prohibited the federal government from recognizing same-sex marriage had to be torn down. Okay, and this is actually a problem for me because I agree with the ruling, but I disagree with the process. They did not follow the process. This is so close to Prop 8. The financial aspect is irrelevant in this case. It doesn't change the fact that you had two parties who did not feel the need, did not have a dispute at this point. Ugh. You don't screw the system like that to try to do this stuff. You don't. It is improper, it is incorrect, it is invalid, and it is wrong, because you're basically encouraging everyone else to do the same damn thing. No. I mean, I think that some rules are dumb as shit. I will still follow them. I will do what I can to change them, but I will follow them. There we go again. Camera. I will follow them until they're changed, because I believe very strongly that we should follow the rules that are laid out for us, and we should follow the procedure for amending those rules. The only time when we should circumvent those rules is when there is literally no other option. When personal liberty is in such a threat that on a large scale, not on an individual scale, but a large scale, people's fundamental rights are being denied. And I'm like talking about constitutional rights here when I talk about fundamental rights. Constitution and Bill of Rights kind of stuff, when those are being denied on a massive scale and it is causing direct and immediate harm to the citizenry, that is when you start messing with the system like that. But that is like extreme case, and neither of these circumstances were extreme case enough. So this is the kind of liberal attitude that I have been objecting to with the more under the liberal label. I mean, yeah, DOMA was a good win for the liberal ideology, but I think it was actually a loss, because we basically said we don't care about the rules, we just want to get the outcome we wanted. The ends justify the means, basically. It's very frustrating for me, and I've found that I don't necessarily agree with a Democrat position anymore, because Democrat and liberal positions are very strongly intertwined. A lot of the people who supported the DOMA ruling were Democrats, though I've got to say I love Chief Justice Roberts' dissension write-up in the ruling. Chief Justice Roberts has my full respect and support. That guy is awesome. I don't know how he does his job, but he's got an incredibly clear and level head and is able to balance the spirit and the letter of the law to such a degree that I'm shocked and amazed. So, anyways, just personal opinion there. Anyways, so I had to do some soul searching, and one of the things that I've been realizing is that I have a lot of admiration for people who identify themselves as Republicans from the early 1900s. The best example, excuse me, I just finished eating. The best example I can give of this is Grace and Edith Abbott. And they were born late 1800s. And Grace Abbott is probably the more popular one. Grace Abbott was the second ever director of the United States Children's Bureau, and one of the very first women to ever represent the United States in an international setting. And that was to help address the issue of women and girls in international trafficking. And this is a woman who did some amazing things, and did it from what would today almost be considered a welfare perspective. And this is someone who identifies as a Republican. Now, this is important because around the time of FDR, Republicans and Democrats kind of switched ideologies. It's very complicated, and I might talk about it in another video. It's actually kind of cool too. But these sort of old school Republicans, or I think the term is a Goldwater Republican, I find that I have a lot in common with them, because they're not conservatives. A lot of them don't believe that the way to run society is to conserve what we have, to keep the ideas and the philosophies and the views of our ancestors and hold on to them. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. I mean, if it works, keep doing it. If it happens to have been what people have done before, then yay, you've got more experience to draw on, but that doesn't make it better. That doesn't even make it right. Now, with people like Grace Abbott, They're very forward-thinking. They saw problems coming up and they wanted to address it to make the world better. They were willing to dig in and make change happen. That is not conservative. That is progressive. That is the behaviors and actions of someone who has a progressive ideology. So I've kind of had to do a little bit of finagling, but I think from here on out, I identify myself as a progressive Republican. As crazy as that sounds. I think there's actually a fair amount of people who would use us would identify similarly, but you know, I can't say for sure. But yeah. So that is my internal process of how I now am changing my political affiliation, and I'm actually identifying somewhat with a party that I used to detest. I'm not saying I'm a Republican. I'm saying I'm a progressive Republican, so it's kind of like a subset, you know, and kind of like the Tea Party is a subset of the Republican Party, just in the complete opposite way that I am. But yeah, I identify now as a progressive Republican as opposed to an independent. That my official registration before was as an independent. So I don't know if I'll actually register as a Republican. I'm currently registered as Colorado's equivalent of declined estate. I don't remember what that is off the top of my head, but anyways. So I am now past 30 minutes. I am going to cut this one off now, and feedback, thoughts, comments, etc. Whatever you want to throw at me.